Is this on? Oh, hello there, everyone. It's me, Winston. I have to say, this BlizzCon event is pretty incredible. I even thought I'd seen some of my friends around here, but it turned out to be some cosplayers. How embarrassing for me. Anyways, welcome to the Overwatch Play-by-Sound panel. Today, the Overwatch Sound team is going to walk you through the sounds of the battlefield and how they help you understand what's going on in the chaos of a fight. To start things off, here's my friend Scott. He's going to tell you more about what to expect from our presentation today.
Good morning. Wow, it is such an honor to be up here with you all today. We would like to start this off with a little question that I want to ask everyone. When you're playing Overwatch, by show of hands, do you play with the sound on? Yes! That is a good crowd. I knew you would do it. One of the things that I've noticed myself, I like to play a lot of Reaper. And what I do is when I'm attacking on a point, I tend to teleport behind the lines of the enemy, trying to sneak up on maybe some support characters or snipers. So one of the things that frequently happens to me is I'll get out there behind a Widowmaker and I'll teleport right behind her. She won't notice me. I'll walk up, hold up the weapons, and bam, she's done. And I know she's not playing with sound. So hopefully you've noticed this type of thing as well when you've played. And we do a lot of things by telegraphing that teleport with a line of VO, with the sound that's very obvious with these crows. And we do a lot to make sure that you have a chance to react to your threats that are around you. So today, the play-by-sound, before I get into that, the play-by-sound goal was really outlined to us by Jeffrey Kaplan, our game director, early on when we were working on Overwatch. He really wanted us to be able to give as much information to you as a player as we possibly could. And when you're viewing a game, you have a rectangle around you, and you've got all your visual information there. But sound works in 360 degrees. So hopefully we'll show you some things today that let you see what we did and how we approached the problems. Like one, hero identities. Paul's going to be coming up to talk to you about how we made each hero sonically unique And hopefully that helped you identify who everyone is. Dynamic sounds. We put a lot of gameplay information into our sounds. There's hero voices, which Michael Chu, our writer, is going to talk about making each of these characters unique heroes. Focus on the threat. There's a lot of systems that we have that kind of run behind the scenes to focus you on the most important sounds. And the music of Overwatch. Derek, Adam, and our special guest Neil are going to be coming out later to do one final music performance. And then keep your questions, because right after that we'll come back out for a short Q&A. But that's the overview of today, and then Paul's going to come out and start it off with hero identities. Scott.
Let's try that again. There should be a sound right there. A scientist gorilla from the moon with rage issues. A lovable robot who has a bird for his best friend.
Oh, let's break it. Damn!
And a speed skating DJ with a sonic blaster. Are you kidding me? Because as a sound design team, we felt like we had virtually won the lottery. I mean, what an incredibly cool opportunity to help bring these kinds of heroes to life. Now, as Scott mentioned, we had this play-by-sound goal. And to support this goal, it was important that we were able to telegraph the identity of enemies before they emerge around corners or jump you from behind. So we wanted to deliver with sonic fingerprints. Okay, creating sonic fingerprints. That sounds easy, but where to begin? I mean, luckily there are no wrong answers when you're designing sounds for weapons and abilities that don't yet exist. So to hone in on a starting point, it was important that we first narrow down the sets of possible sounds we might use from potentially anything in the universe to a very small palette of sounds, targeted and reserved for each hero. So my hope is that by sharing with you today our sound design philosophy and the process we use to narrow down those sets of sounds, you'll be better equipped to recognize and react to unseen threats while you're playing. So let's take a look at one of our first heroes. So actually, before I proceed, I want to talk about that one shot real quickly because there's so much information packed inside. When you hear that sniper shot, you know what? You know it's Widowmaker, you know she's sniping you, you know she was pretty close to getting you, and if you had headphones on, you'd likely have an idea where she's perched. So that's a lot of information, but for the moment, we're just going to focus on her identity. And what do we know about Widowmaker? She's an assassin who's pretty much got ice in her veins. So we gave her these attributes that really, we think, help identify her as a unique hero. She's surgical. Her sounds are going to slice through the air, just like that sniper shot or her grappling hook. She's deliberate. When she moves with purpose. There's nothing loose or jangly about her rig, and her footsteps never scuff or drag the ground. And finally, cold-blooded. What else is cold-blooded? Snakes. So of course we had to put some recordings of snakes into the sound of her scope as it rises and falls, kind of reminiscent of a cobra's hood as it's threatening to strike. And it's there subtly, but its intent is to play with subconscious fears that players might have of snakes. And if you're dealing with Widowmaker, a little fear is not a bad instinct to have. So in this way, we take these attributes that we assign to each hero and we try to infuse them throughout all the sounds that a hero might make. What do we know about Tracer? She's fast, she manipulates time, she's pretty hyper. So we gave her these attributes: temporal, light, and caffeinated. Let's hear how that turned out. And I think this is such a cool sound because it's pretty easy to hear bits of all of those attributes in her blink, and it's one sound that I think is super effective at telegraphing Tracer's location on a map. We've got another, Genji. Actually, I think I'm going to hand off now to Brian Farr, who's going to explain what Genji has in common with kitchen knives, cookie cutters, and garden tools.
How's everybody doing? Do we have any Genji players out there? You're the guys that people run from. All right, so Genji. So what do cookie cutters, kitchen knives, and garden tools have in common? Well, they're all sharp, agile, quick, and cutting. So where did Genji start? Well, in my kitchen. Plenty of cutting and sharp items to play with. And each of them all have unique sounds. And you take a lot of these sounds and you put them together, and that's what you essentially hear in the game. Here's a little demonstration. This wine opener, my wife wasn't happy me taking. This was used for the clicks and clacks of Genji's wrist launcher. And these cookie cutters for the shuriken's sound of clicking and clacking as well. And this interesting garden tool, this actually became the most identifiable sound that Genji has, and I'll talk about that later. Ring. So I actually started with a crossbow, recorded at a close perspective. This gave the snap and the sound that lets everyone on the battlefield know Genji's firing at you. And these swords, this is actually from the Blizzard Foley closet. Combining some of these swords together, it came up with this unique sound for the shurikens. A little bit processed. And this bamboo was used for Genji, the whoosh of his hand moving really quickly. And then these interesting items, well, cookie cutters and butter knives became the main sound of the shurikens when they leave the wrist launcher. And then finally taking this garden tool, which had that identifiable ring, and this iPhone cable, spinning it really, really quickly, you probably will recognize this sound. Because that's a sound that's pretty much, if you hear that, you're probably going to die if you don't get out of the way. So let's hear it all in the game. There you have it. Thank you. I'm going to bring up someone else, though. Completely on the other side of the spectrum, one of my favorite heroes he's going to talk about. Here's Chris De La Pena.
He's sloppy, he's slow, he's noisy, and his name is Roadhog. If you've run into Roadhog on the battlefield, you know how devastating his hook and scrap cannon can be at close range. So it was super important for us to design a unique sound kit so you can hear the jangle of his chains, the rustling of his gear, the lumbering of his footsteps, and the sound of scrap being loaded into his scrap cannon right before he hooks you. Here's footage of some of the things used to record Roadhog's unique sound kit. Something like that. As you saw, I recorded a bunch of metal pieces of different sizes and shapes, which I layered into his actions. In this next video, you'll hear his primary fire, reload, and his ultimate whole hog with the scrap sounds isolated, followed by those sounds fully implemented. Here we go. So another big part of Roadhog's sound identity is his movement. He's got a lot of flair. From his hook and chains, his tactical vest, his gas mask, and his pants that are uncomfortably low for my taste. Here's some examples of the movement sounds created to support his sloppy aesthetic. Hook and chains. Tactical vest. His body sounds. Sweaty leather. Just like his movement, his footsteps also needed to support his sloppy aesthetic. Here are the sounds that make up his footsteps. A clumsy boot. A squishy layer that might be his sweaty foot sliding around in his boot. A sub-bass layer for his weight. So after implementing and mixing these many sounds, Roadhog's movement ended up sounding like this. Thanks. So we had a ton of fun designing Roadhog's sound kit, and I hope you all are having a blast playing him. Thank you.
Wow, that Roadhog guy's a real animal. There's so much going on in a round of Overwatch, but sound helps us make sense of the chaos. Each specific sound contains a ton of information. Well, think about the sound of a hero's movement, or the Deadeye from McCree. Actually, I don't like to think about the Deadeye. It gives me nightmares. Here's Paul again to tell you more.
Thanks. So as you have seen, a lot of work has gone into making clear who you're encountering on the battlefield. But for players to be able to make split-second decisions and to be able to learn and understand from their mistakes, it's really important for sound to also convey what's happening. Just what are those heroes doing? So in order to convey critical gameplay information in a way that's more immersive without relying on additional UI or inserting a mini-map, we rely on game data to dynamically drive many of the sounds and phrases that you hear through a match. So things like low ammo, your shield status, warnings about threats from behind are all consuming game data in real time and driven by live events. Let's listen to a couple.
Watch your back.
Barrier won't hold forever!
Taking the point.
So there are about 450 data streams that we refer to as data flows that are being created by our gameplay engine. And these data streams are available for audio as well as other disciplines to consume. So you can think of data flow very much as like water moving through a pipe. And if we decide we need that information, we go to the pipe, we put in a tap, and we let the data flow down to our sounds, and it's driving pitch, volume, filters. So some of the many data flows that sound is using, we use bullets remaining, which comes into play when your ammo clip is running out. Heal beam progress, so that Mercy always knows when she's topped off the health of one of her friends. Capture point progress, I think we get that. The rip tire airtime is kind of cool because we modulate the sound based on if the tire is losing traction with the earth. And then is crouching. And is crouching is kind of a cool one because it hints at a much bigger system that data flow drives in terms of player movements. And to explain more about that, let me hand off to Justin DeClute.
Hey, how's it going?
Can you guys hear these? All right, let's try that again. Could you hear those? All right, all of our heroes' footsteps have unique speed, weight, cadence, and personality. In addition to this, we adjust the volume and clarity of them depending on battlefield conditions. For instance, we all love being amped up by Lucio when leaving the spawn room. But did you know that when this occurs, the enemy team hears your footsteps almost twice as loud as they normally would? This may be why they're ready for you when you arrive to the checkpoint. We significantly change the volume and sound of heroes' footsteps in-game based on whether you're crouching, running, or being amped up by Lucio. In this next video, I've isolated Zarya's footsteps so you can hear the volume changes based off of her movement type. That's a pretty significant difference. In addition to this, we also change the volume and mix when hearing enemy or friendly footsteps. Most importantly, this is all done in real time within the engine using data flow, as Paul mentioned. Now I'm going to show you the drastic difference between the sound of McCree's footsteps depending on whether he's a friend or an enemy. Barely hear the second one there. Now you'll see a group of teammates with a single enemy running by. Notice how the enemy Hanzo stands out, even though there are larger and more of your team. After showing you some of these examples of the dynamic nature of footsteps in our game, it's important to know that if you hear an enemy's footsteps, it's for a reason. So use this knowledge to your advantage when you're on the battlefield to make critical decisions. Soon, we'll also be coming out with a new map, Eco Point Antarctica, that you might have heard yesterday at the opening ceremonies. With its bitter, cold atmosphere and its permanent blizzard-like conditions, playing by sound is more important than ever, so you can find or evade your foes. To further elaborate on how we change... It's also coming out on the PTR next week. But to further elaborate on how we change our audio for enemy or friendly perspectives, here's Chris Giampa.
Thank you, Justin. Howdy, partners. So quick show of hands. How many of you have noticed the difference between the teammate and enemy voiceover and sound effects in your matches? All right, so a lot of you are paying attention to the audio. That's awesome. So in Overwatch, we change the audio playback based on perspective. Whether it's your first-person sound effects, enemy, or teammate, the audio will play back differently for you. So let's take McCree's Deadeye as an example and break down the differences between each perspective. So in first person, you will always hear the greatest, most powerful version of your sound effects, whether it be the weapon fire abilities or ultimate abilities. So in McCree's suite of sounds, for Deadeye, we have his gun draw and holster foley, a typical Western Hawk, a somewhat reminiscent whistle, a dry desert wind, a guitar and clock ticking loop that pitches up throughout the duration of 6 seconds, and of course, his voiceover. Everybody say it with me now.
It's high noon.
So here's how all this sounds in the game without firing a shot.
It's high noon.
So along with those sounds in first person, we also have the acquiring sounds. So we have an acquire start, which is a whip whoosh and a bell tolling. It sounds like this. When you've acquired a target, we have a whip crack and a metallic clink lock-on sound. Sounds like this. And here's how everything sounds in the game in first person after you fire some shots.
It's high noon.
So for the enemy version of the sound effects, we typically mix them at a farther distance radius at a louder volume to bring your attention to it. For McCree's Deadeye, we actually have his full suite of sound effects. We add the bell tolling, and of course his threatening enemy VO of High Noon. So the friendly versions, we actually typically mix them at a smaller distance radius at a quieter volume to not draw your attention to it as much. And in McCree's example, we actually removed the Western whistle sound as well. And we changed the voiceover as well, depending if it's a friendly or enemy team. So here is the two videos. The first one will be the enemy version, and the second one will be the friendly or teammate version. Pay attention to the difference between the two.
It's high noon.
Here's friendly.
Step right up.
So the more you're aware of the difference between your teammates and enemy sound effects, you'll have a heads up on the competition, making you a better player. Thank you.
Oh, wow, McCree's voice is scary. Speaking of voices, we have a very special guest today that Michael can help introduce.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So, on Overwatch, we're very lucky to work with some of the most talented voice actors, and they really help to bring these characters to life. And I'm really privileged today to bring out a special guest, the man behind the monkey, actually not a monkey, scientist, Winston, Mr. Crispin Glover, or Crispin Freeman, wow. Wow, I don't know where that came from.
That's all right. There aren't that many Crispins, so.
So, Crispin, you are obviously the voice behind Winston, who is personally one of my favorite characters. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of when we bring you a character, which is a sketch with some art and some characteristics and some backstory, and bring the characters to life.
Sure. So, during the audition process, you guys sent out some ideas about what you were thinking about as Winston. And as an actor, when I'm trying to bring that character to life, there are two things that I'm trying to focus on. The obvious is what he's got to sound like. He's a 500-pound gorilla, and so he's got to sound sort of big and dark and scary, and But the other thing is that I have to understand his psychology. If I don't understand his psychology, then I'm just making a funny voice. And so I'm looking at the clues that you're giving me to try to figure out what is Winston's heart, what does he care about? And for me, Winston was incredibly idealistic. He just wants things to be a certain way. Can't we all just live up to our ideals? And so that helps sort of shape the character and influence how I'm going to perform him.
So you mentioned, obviously, Winston is a gorilla, and is there anything particular about the performance, that you help to embody, that giant frame?
Well, obviously, I'm having to use like the lowest part of my range in order to be able to play Winston effectively. But I find that if I stress out too much about how to make his voice, it never comes out right. Whereas if I actually try to play pretend as the character and care about the same things that Winston cares about, then all I have to do is hear Tracer say, is that you, Winston? And I'm destroyed in the booth. Like I just go, she goes, it's been a long time. I go, yes, it has. And it just sort of comes out of me naturally that way because I'm trying to embody the character as fully as possible. And then I depend on my instrument, which I've trained over many years, that my voice will be there to support me when I'm trying to give that emotional performance.
Just personally curious, do you have any Winstonisms that you particularly enjoy?
I mean, I could quote him all day, but you know, I do love his catchphrase that sort of, imagination is the essence of discovery. And I mean, that to me sort of encapsulates Winston. It's so wonderful. It's this thing about sometimes when a foreigner comes to a new country, they can see the country better than the locals can. There's something about Winston having sat on the moon and looked at Earth from above and said, you know, there's this ideal that we should all live up to. And then he lands on Earth and the humans go, yeah, Winston, you know, we've got these ideals, but no one actually lives up to them. And Winston goes, why not? You know, like he doesn't understand. Why not live up to these ideals? Why don't we strive for that at all times?
Yeah, so I think I speak for everyone saying that you've truly helped us create an amazing character who you've really brought to light through your talents. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is what helps, it's stuff that we really think about when we're creating the cast of Overwatch. You know, we have 23 characters now, and being able to find places to make them different and to differentiate them is really a part of what we're talking about here. When you're playing on the battlefield and you hear Winston, there's no question that there's a giant gorilla coming after you. You know, it's not Reaper,
yeah.
It's not Genji. And yeah.
Yeah, it's the Winston. He's quoting the quadratic equation as he kicks your butt, but you know, that's his job. He's really good at calculus.
Yeah, so we use a lot of things like vocal tone, age of characters, texture. We use the way that characters talk about things. Obviously, Winston has a little bit of maybe a little nerdy side to him. He's very earnest. That contrasts a lot with characters like Sombra, who are you know, maybe a little more over things. So anyways, I think you know, these are things that we think about when we're making our characters, and we want them to pop and really differentiate them. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we have an awesome panel later today at 2:30, the United Nations of Overwatch, which will feature our Winston voice here and a bunch of other of the really talented actors who are on Overwatch. So I hope you'll join us.
Yes, look forward to seeing you guys all this afternoon at the Voice Actors panel. All right. And now, let's do a little Winston live, shall we?
Well, wasn't that fun? Next, I'd like to get into how the heroes of Overwatch focus their attention in battle. With 12 heroes in a match, things can get a bit hectic. Take a moment to listen before tackling an objective, and you'll find that sound helps you focus on your greatest threat. It's saved my life more times than I can count. Here's Scott to talk about how sounds help us focus on the right things.
How cool is that? Yeah, how do you follow up Crispin right now? But it's pretty amazing. We're so happy to be here. But I want to switch back to some of this play-by sound, the whole point that we're trying to get at here, and talk about focusing on the threat. So this voice system is one of the big keys to doing that. We have a lot of information there. We also have this thing called the importance system, which sort of kind of balances the mix towards what you need to hear. And there's also an obstruction and an occlusion system, which helps kind of dull out the sounds that you don't need to hear. So to start this off, I'm going to jump right into the voice system a bit. We had a chance, a blank slate, to sort of create our own system for this game. And we decided to go with something that was a very criteria-based system, meaning all these things are happening in the world. This criteria happens, and this criteria happens. And the combination of these things happening is then sent down to your machine from the internet, magic, and suddenly it causes your heroes to speak. And on your machine, we're making all these decisions about what you need to hear at any given time. So only certain things are broadcast to you, and you only hear the things that are important. So a couple examples of this, ultimate abilities.
Justice reigns from above.
Anyone know what to do? You run, you shoot, you do anything you can to react to that.
Fire in the hole!
Start looking for the tire, right? And then there's location callouts, where we call out things like turrets.
They've got a teleporter.
Or
We've got to find
teleporters.
it.
These are the type of things that give you all this subtle information that you don't even realize is necessarily happening, And it allows you to be like, oh, okay, teleporter, that's my mission, I'm the flanker, I need to take care of that. But then there's even lines that are only for you. So enemies.
Enemy contact.
You're calling out when those come up. Or there's even a very special one.
Behind you.
That's something that your friendly units will tell you when you're getting shot from behind. No one else hears that. So if you hear them say behind you and you're on the battlefield, that means that you need to react, no one else. And then we do other stuff with gameplay objectives. So even the heroes themselves comment on what's happening and how to work together and how to be an effective teammate.
They're taking the objective.
So the voice system hopefully will help you to play better, and the more you listen to it, the more in tune with it you are, the better you'll do. Also, I'm going to switch over to the importance system here. So we have a separate system called importance, and this is intended to focus your sound effects on the things that are your biggest threat. So if you look at this image here, even in the background, you can see that there's a Winston jumping through the air and some explosion. You might think that that should be the focus of the mix. But what if that Winston is your friendly unit and that grenade really doesn't matter? But if you look in that corner, there's a Roadhog who's doing an ultimate ability. He's shooting right at you. Sure, he's further away, he's not as obvious, but really the mix should be focusing on him. So we asked ourselves a lot of questions. How can you achieve this? So really we're trying to get at this overall point of who is the greatest threat. So we have all these sub-questions we ask, like, well, am I looking at him? Okay, that might be interesting. Or are they looking at me? Well, that's maybe even more interesting. Or who's close by? Or who's shooting their weapon nearby? Okay, those are getting more and more interesting. Who's using a dangerous ability? And who's damaging me? So we have all these different questions that we kind of ask ourselves, and then we rely on programmers to create systems around this. So I'm going to bring up Tomas Neumann, who's helped us create these into something that we can actually use in the game.
Thanks, Scott. So once we came up with all these questions, the audio team needed someone to program this important system. So they asked Athena. No, just kidding. She was busy. I did it. In every frame in Overwatch, when you play with your friends, I calculate a value of importance for all the other heroes around you so you can focus on the highest threat, and I will tell you how I do it. So let's say you're the blue arrow there, and there's a Junkrat nearby. Junkrat is not even looking at you. Still, Junkrat is the most important threat for you to pay attention to. So we put him in a bucket of high importance. And that's why we have the red arrow there. Besides other things, we significantly increase the volume of his sounds. Now Mercy appears. She's a little bit further away. She's not looking at you. She's not doing any damage. So her important points are less than Junkrat's. And we thought, well, how many slots fit in that high bucket? And we decided we want to help you to really focus on the highest threat for you, and that's why in the red bucket you only have one slot. Mercy goes into a yellow bucket of normal importance. We still increase her volume, but only by a little bit. So then Widowmaker appears. When she looks at you, and the person who plays Widowmaker, you're full size on her screen. So that is pretty important. And we even give more important points for her putting the scope up. So by now, Widowmaker is the most important hero, and Junkrat and Mercy both fall into this yellow bucket. And now we thought about, well, how many slots does the yellow bucket have? And we decided 2. So 3 heroes out of the 11 that you usually play against get a very, very special mix and treatment in our sound mix. We can add Tracer. Tracer is shooting at you. Now she steals the slot from Mercy. Mercy falls into a gray bucket. It's a pretty large bucket of low importance. Most of our heroes are actually ending in that gray bucket. And you can see how that plays out now. When you play against 6 enemies, 5 friendlies, and their turrets, 1 hero or turret goes into a red bucket, 2 are in the yellow, and all the rest are pretty much in a gray bucket. What I find so interesting about that system is that by you playing Overwatch with your friends, you essentially mix your own game. And because every game is slightly different, every match also sounds slightly different. but just in a way that you can focus on the highest threat. So we captured a video. You can see the red and yellow outlines actually on the hero and representing their importance. There is Junkrat and Tracer, and they're fighting in the foreground, trying to see who gets the red outline, the highest importance. But really pay attention to Widowmaker in the top middle. When she turns around and comes after you, you can hear her gunshot loud and clear, and you actually have a chance to dodge that deadly bullet. Let's watch the video.
Sniper, keep your heads down.
Yeah. So another thing that I want to talk about is how you learn when heroes are behind walls, and if they cannot harm you, or if they just show up and fight you. So I want to give you some insight about how we compute heroes behind walls and how you can take that to your advantage. So when sounds are behind objects, we usually use two technical terms to describe that, and that's obstruction and occlusion. And without getting too technical, what we really want to avoid are these false positives. So when a hero is behind a street lamp, that shouldn't sound like the same as the hero would be in a different room, or vice versa. And even worse would be if the hero or like your opponent would be in a room above you. That shouldn't sound like that he's just an imminent threat to you. So let's see this. This is a top-down view, your ear and a sound, really simple, and there's an object in the way. And because sounds behave like waves, low frequencies bend around objects better than high frequencies. And that's actually why when I put my hand here, you hear a little muffling effect. Now, if the object is bigger, we lose more high frequencies. And in this case, the sound needs to make so many turns. In the end, it would be a very muffled sound. Now, this is not an easy problem to solve computationally. And we want to keep the game at a really high frame rate. So our talented gameplay programming team came up with this voxel-based 3D sound path data. And we can tap into that information, and we can compute a path between any 2 points in the map, just like here between Roadhog and Tracer. Now, we use the ratio between the straight line and the sound path to create a really smooth value that simulates sound obstruction. And that is what you can learn over time and to estimate when a hero emerges behind the wall. In the midst of the battle, sometimes it's even better for you to just stop and be quiet yourself and listen to the walls, and that gives you a technical advantage. So we have another video for you. It shows heroes emerging in doorways, and not only can you now learn who that hero is because of their really unique footstep sounds that Justin was talking about, but now you can also learn when they appear. Here's the video.
All right. And just to wrap up this section before we move on, we asked ourselves a quick question. What would it be like if we didn't have these systems? So our game has a really cool feature where we could do replays and play back the exact same scenario and change some settings. So we have the exact same replay without the voice system, without the importance system, and without the obstruction and occlusion system. That'll be the first video you see. And then the second video is with all those systems turned back on. Hopefully that'll give you an idea of what these things add to the game.
Hello. Hi. Contact. Turret detected. Tip top. Enemy turret down. Clearing the area. Let's go back again.
Well, we hope you've learned a few tips and tricks for how to use audio to your advantage in Overwatch. Now, there's one last thing that we don't get to talk about nearly enough. The music! From the main theme to the map introductions, it's always such a source of inspiration for all of us. In fact, I can't stop humming it myself. Oh, sorry. Okay. So for a very special treat, here are Derek, Adam, and Neil to play us out with music from the game. Take it away, guys.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today for Q&A, but we're going to be around and available. So maybe, I don't know where security will exactly let us stand, but we'll probably just start over there. And feel free to come up to us. We're all open to questions. We'd love to talk to you all about anything you might have for us. So thanks again.
Thank you for attending.